Loretta Maddox stood center stage at her husband's retirement party, smiling for the cameras, while Vernon Maddox secretly scanned the crowd for the young mistress he thought no one knew about. But Loretta had planned every moment of this night, and before the final toast, she would detonate a truth that would leave their perfect life in ashes. Would you like a few alternate hook options to choose from? Vernon Maddox had always been the kind of man people respected. He wore polished shoes, kept his hair perfectly combed, and never forgot a birthday or office anniversary. He worked at Blackwood Freight Systems, a high-profile logistics company, in Chicago, and had risen steadily from a low-level analyst to the director of operations. For nearly 4 decades, he built a reputation rooted in precision, discipline, and calm leadership. Even his rivals admired the way he handled pressure. At 64, he was set to retire with a full pension, generous stock payouts, and the admiration of his peers. His retirement was to be celebrated with a large party hosted in one of the city's finest hotel ballrooms. Everyone who knew him expected it to be a grand event, just like the legacy he was leaving behind. His wife, Loretta Maddox, was equally admired, though in quieter circles. She had given up her career as a nurse decades earlier to raise their 2 children and support Vernon's demanding job schedule. She took pride in keeping their home warm, elegant, and organized. Their suburban house was filled with antique furniture, fine art from their travels, and framed photos of smiling faces from birthdays and vacations. From the outside, their life appeared perfect. There were no scandals, no public arguments, and no signs of anything unusual. Loretta believed, or at least wanted to believe, that after all the years they had built together, they would grow old hand in hand, free of chaos and regrets. Planning the retirement party had become Loretta's way of honoring their life. She approached it like a mission, drawing up lists, confirming RSVPs, selecting music, and organizing a slideshow that captured every significant moment of Vernon's career. She even hand-wrote personalized thank you notes to each guest who RSVP'd. The guest list included high-ranking company executives, longtime friends, neighbors, and even some of Vernon's old college roommates. Loretta wanted every detail to be flawless. She believed Vernon deserved it, but as the event approached, she began noticing subtle changes in Vernon's behavior. He became more protective of his phone, often turning the screen away when she walked into the room. He started going on long walks alone and stayed out later than usual, claiming meetings and last-minute errands. At first, Loretta told herself it was the stress of retirement. Many people found leaving a long career difficult, but deep down, something started to gnaw at her. Vernon, the same man who once sent her flowers just because it was Tuesday, had grown emotionally distant. He didn't smile at her the same way. He didn't ask her about her day. His affection had become routine, almost mechanical. One afternoon, Loretta found a receipt in the laundry. It had fallen out of the pocket of Vernon's pants and had slipped between the dryer and the wall. The receipt was from a boutique hotel downtown. The date was from 2 weeks earlier. Her stomach turned as she stared at the charge. A room booked, overnight and champagne service ordered at midnight. Vernon had told her he was staying late for an executive dinner meeting. That same night, she had made dinner for him, kept it warm, and waited until nearly midnight before finally going to bed alone. She hadn't asked questions when he returned the next morning, assuming he was exhausted from a long night. But now, the puzzle pieces didn't fit. Still, she said nothing. She didn't want to believe the worst without proof. Loretta started watching Vernon closely. She listened for the change in his tone when he spoke on the phone. She checked his coat pockets when he left them on the sofa. She even looked through his desk drawers under the excuse of looking for extra envelopes, but she found nothing. Until 3 nights before the party. Loretta was changing the sheets in their bedroom when her fingers brushed against something thin and papery under Vernon's pillow. Curious, she reached in and pulled out a plain white envelope. It had no name, no label. Inside were 6 printed photographs. Each one sent a sharp stab through her chest. Vernon was in them, smiling, shirtless, kissing a much younger woman in a resort setting. The background was clear: beach umbrellas, palm trees, a luxury hotel pool. The woman had long dark hair, wore revealing outfits, and looked to be no older than 28. They looked comfortable, intimate, like lovers. The dates printed on the bottom corners showed the photos were taken just 3 months ago. Loretta sat down on the bed, the envelope still in her hands. Her mind went blank at first. Then, wave after wave of realization hit her. The late nights, the cold tone, the receipt. It all made sense now. The man she had built her life around had been living a double existence behind her back. And now, she had undeniable proof. But Loretta didn't cry. Not then. Something inside her shifted. She placed the photos back in the envelope, tucked it into her purse, and quietly finished making the bed. She stared at the wall for a long time. She thought of the years she gave up, the moments she believed were real, the family she worked so hard to protect. And then, she made a decision. She would not confront Vernon before the party. She would not scream, beg, or demand answers. That would be too easy for him. Instead, she would let him bask in his glory, enjoy his carefully built image one last time, and then she would destroy it, publicly, permanently, and without warning. The house was quiet the next morning, but Loretta's mind raced with noise. Every movement Vernon made now seemed calculated. The way he avoided eye contact, the casual excuses for stepping out, the sudden interest in new clothes, especially tailored, shirts and expensive shoes he never used to wear. She noticed it all, but said nothing. Her silence was no longer driven by denial, it was strategy. She was planning something carefully, and with a precision even Vernon would have admired had he known. With the envelope of photos safely hidden in her sewing cabinet, Loretta started her quiet investigation. She wanted to know who the young woman was, how long the affair had been going on, and just how far Vernon's lies had stretched. She couldn't rely on him slipping up again. She had to find something concrete, something beyond the photos, something that would give her complete control. Loretta waited until Vernon left for his final pre-retirement meeting at the office. She had timed his routine perfectly by now. He would be gone for at least 4 hours, maybe more if he stopped for lunch with his colleagues. She walked into his home office, a place he usually kept locked, but had left open in a rush that morning. His desk was spotless, but Loretta knew Vernon well enough to understand that cleanliness didn't mean there was nothing hidden. She began by checking his computer. It was password protected, but Vernon, in his predictability, had used their anniversary date as his code for years. It still worked. The screen opened up to a browser with dozens of tabs, news articles, freight industry journals, and then a private email account she didn't recognize. The email address was unfamiliar, but the inbox was full of exchanges between Vernon and someone signed Z. Most of the messages were flirtatious and intimate, filled with affectionate language and references to secret getaways. Loretta scrolled until she found a name: Zephyra Lane. It sounded like the name of a perfume or a stage actress, but it was real. Zephyra referred to Vernon as V in many of the messages. There were attachments too: selfies taken in a mirror, receipts from hotels, and even a scanned boarding pass from a trip to Puerto Rico. Loretta copied everything onto a flash drive she brought from her knitting drawer. It felt surreal, dragging files with such explosive content into a folder labeled Bills 2016, just in case Vernon checked the device later. After closing the laptop and restoring the desk to its original state, she searched the drawers. Tucked between old tax files and paper clips was a small leather notebook. It didn't look special, but inside were scribbled notes, dates, meeting times, and initials. Loretta noticed a pattern. Every Wednesday afternoon, Vernon had marked the letters ZL beside a time and location. Restaurants, bookstores, even art galleries she had never heard of. He had been meeting Zephyra regularly and in public places. That kind of boldness shocked her. She returned the notebook to its place, locked the flash drive in a box in her closet, and tried to process the full weight of what she had uncovered. Zephyra Lane wasn't just a fling. She was a regular fixture in Vernon's life. Someone he had made time for during work hours, someone he had taken on vacations, someone who had possibly been a part of his life for months or even years. Later that evening, Vernon returned home with a box of cupcakes, pretending they were a surprise treat from a coworker. Loretta played her role effortlessly. She smiled, thanked him, even joked about how she'd miss seeing him in a tie every morning. Vernon laughed, relieved to find her still predictable and sweet. He didn't notice her eyes briefly flicking to the clock on the wall, mentally noting the time of his return. He didn't know that she was logging every word he said now, comparing it to the emails she had read hours earlier. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Loretta finalized the guest list for the party. She arranged for a professional videographer. She even created a slideshow of Vernon's career highlights, some of the same photos she planned to use, but with a sinister twist. She contacted her old friend Dorian Pell, a retired IT specialist who now volunteered for a local theatre. Dorian owed her a favor, and when she explained what she needed, hidden cameras, live feeds, private streaming, he agreed without hesitation. Loretta didn't reveal the full extent of what she planned to do, only that she wanted a dramatic moment Vernon would never forget. She also created a fake email account and sent an invitation to Zephyra Lane, posing as Vernon's executive assistant. In the message, she explained that Vernon wanted her to attend the party as a special guest, but wanted to keep it a surprise. The location and time were detailed, along with the suggestion to dress formally. It was a risky move, but Loretta suspected the younger woman wouldn't be able to resist. Each night, she rehearsed her expression in the mirror. She practiced smiling through fury. She trained her voice to sound calm while her heart boiled. She looked at herself longer than she had in years. There were wrinkles, grey hairs, and soft lines around her mouth. Years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of motherhood and aging. She no longer saw a passive woman. She saw someone sharpened by betrayal, preparing not just for revenge, but for justice. By the morning of the party, everything was in place. Vernon was cheerful, unaware, wearing his best suit and thanking Loretta for organizing such a meaningful send-off. Loretta nodded gently. Her smile was perfect. Her silence was louder than any accusation. And deep inside, she knew this would be the last day Vernon Maddox lived as a respected man. The Maddox home buzzed with activity as guests began arriving for the retirement party. Cars lined the driveway and spilled onto the street. Inside, the living room had been transformed into a display of Vernon's legacy. Framed photographs of his career milestones were arranged beside plaques and commendations from the shipping company he had served for nearly 4 decades. A banner stretched across the back wall, reading, "Honoring Vernon Maddox, a lifetime of dedication." To most, it was a celebration, but to Loretta, it was a carefully staged trap. Loretta moved through the house gracefully, greeting friends, family, and colleagues with a practiced ease. She wore a soft mauve dress that made her look gentle and unassuming. Her makeup was flawless, her hair pinned back in a style Vernon had always liked. She smiled, she laughed, she poured drinks, and yet her eyes never stopped scanning the room. She wasn't waiting for Vernon to slip. She was waiting for Zephyra to appear. The catering team she'd hired kept everyone well fed. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. Vernon floated through the house, beaming as people clapped him on the back and raised toasts in his honor. His charm was in full force. He spoke about mentorship, sacrifice, the importance of loyalty, all with a straight face. Loretta watched him from across the room, noting every lie he told. He had no idea his evening of glory was already unraveling behind the scenes. Hidden behind a decorative partition Dorian had set up his camera equipment. Small wireless devices were placed in key areas of the house. Loretta's instructions had been precise. Capture everything. The entryway, the kitchen, the hallway leading to Vernon's study, all monitored. A separate microphone, tucked into the bouquet near the podium, would capture Vernon's speech later. Dorian sat quietly, adjusting his monitors, checking for sound quality. The signal streamed to a private server Loretta could access from her phone. Then, just after 6:45 p.m., a black sedan pulled up to the curb. Zephyra Lane stepped out, dressed in an emerald green dress that hugged her figure tightly. She looked young, bold, confident, completely unaware of what she was walking into. She paused at the door for only a moment before stepping inside. A wave of gasps rippled through the room. No one recognized her. Not at first. But Vernon did. He was standing near the fireplace, talking to a former supervisor when his eyes locked on Zephyra. The change in his face was instant. The color drained. His smile stiffened. He dropped the wineglass in his hand, and it shattered on the tile floor. Loretta watched from the kitchen, pretending to fuss over hors d'oeuvres, her heart hammering. She waited, resisting the urge to rush forward. She wanted Vernon to squirm. Zephyra looked around, her smile faltering as she realized no one was approaching her. She was clearly uncomfortable, clutching a small purse in both hands. Vernon, desperate to avoid attention, finally crossed the room and intercepted her. He whispered something hurriedly, touching her elbow, steering her toward the hallway that led to his study. They disappeared from view. Guests murmured, confused. Some looked at Loretta for answers, but she simply raised her glass and toasted the room. What Vernon didn't know was that the study had a camera too. In the back room, Dorian adjusted the audio levels. He frowned at what he heard. Raised voices, frantic and panicked, a man's voice pleading, a woman's voice sharp with confusion. Vernon's tone was not the cool, confident one he used in public. It was panicked, strained, cracking. Zephyra's voice was angry, not romantic. The betrayal in her tone was unmistakable. She had been lied to as well. Loretta's phone vibrated in her clutch with a notification. Motion detected. Study camera. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She already knew what was unfolding. 10 minutes later, Vernon and Zephyra returned to the living room. They weren't holding hands now. They weren't smiling. Vernon was sweating. His tie was askew. Zephyra's eyes were rimmed red, but she held her head high. She moved toward the door, but before she could leave, Loretta stepped in front of her. There was no confrontation, no shouting, just a simple nod. And then Loretta turned and stepped up to the microphone near the podium. She thanked everyone for coming. She made a few jokes about Vernon's stubborn work ethic and his refusal to ever take vacation days. The crowd laughed. Vernon tried to smile, but he looked as though he might be sick. Then she signaled Dorian. The lights dimmed, and the projector on the far wall flickered to life. The room quieted. The slideshow began innocently. Photos of Vernon in his early days at the company, group shots from annual retreats, a family vacation in Florida. The music was upbeat, nostalgic. Then suddenly, the images changed. A photo of Vernon walking hand in hand with Zephyra through a shopping district. A still image of them kissing outside a hotel. A snapshot from their Puerto Rico trip, taken from the exact email Loretta had found. The room went dead silent. Vernon stepped forward, stammering. People gasped. Someone dropped a wineglass. Then the audio clip played, an excerpt from the study just minutes earlier. Zephyra's voice was loud and clear, demanding answers. Vernon's voice cracked as he begged her to stay calm. The room erupted. Guests turned toward Vernon with disbelief. Some of his longtime friends looked away in embarrassment. His former boss muttered something and headed for the door. Vernon tried to speak, to defend himself, but the damage had been done. He looked toward Loretta, who stood calmly near the stage, her expression unreadable. This wasn't just a betrayal of a marriage. It was a public unraveling of the man everyone thought they knew. Zephyra left first, head held high. Vernon stood alone as the party disintegrated around him. No one toasted him now. No one offered congratulations. Loretta remained near the window, her hands folded in front of her, breathing evenly. She had taken back control in the most unforgettable way, and Vernon had no idea how much further the fall would go. The silence in the Maddox home the next morning was thick and suffocating. The streamers and decorations from the party remained, drooping and dull in the morning light. Empty glasses lined the kitchen counter, and half-eaten appetizers sat untouched. What should have been a memory of celebration had turned into a shrine of shame. Vernon sat alone in the living room, slumped on the couch in the same wrinkled suit from the night before. His phone buzzed constantly, but he didn't dare answer it. Every message, every call, was either from someone demanding an explanation or someone cutting ties. Loretta, meanwhile, moved through the house in silence. She wasn't crying, she wasn't yelling. She was calm, almost too calm. She cleaned. Around him, picked up plates, wiped counters. Her quiet presence unnerved Vernon more than any outburst could have. He watched her move, wondering how long she had known, how far back her plan had started. It wasn't just the footage or the pictures. She had predicted his every move. The woman he had once underestimated had cornered him like a seasoned tactician, and now she wasn't done. Later that afternoon, Vernon made the mistake of leaving the house. He needed air, he told himself. He walked to the local coffee shop a few blocks away, but instead of peace, he found whispers. Eyes followed him. A young man behind the counter paused as he took Vernon's order, clearly recognizing him. Someone in line behind him chuckled under their breath. The cashier handed over the coffee with a look that wasn't pity, it was amusement. Vernon didn't drink it. He left the cup on a table and walked home in a daze. What he didn't know was that the footage had already leaked. Dorian had been given permission to edit a copy and send it to one person, a close friend of Loretta's named Shonda. Kipley, who happened to be a well-known podcaster and blogger. Shonda uploaded a blurred and anonymized version of the confrontation as part of her latest exposé on Suburban scandals. Within hours, clips from the party trended online. Though names weren't directly used, it didn't take long for people in their community to piece everything together. Vernon's affair became digital currency, shared in group chats and posted with biting commentary. His legacy, his 40-year career, his spotless reputation was boiled down to a 7-minute viral video. Inside the Maddox home, Loretta sat in her office upstairs, monitoring the fallout. She had no plans to stop what was happening. In fact, she had only just begun to release the layers of betrayal Vernon had wrapped himself in. She'd discovered more than just an affair. There were payments made from their joint account to Zephyra's rent, lavish gifts charged to credit cards, even a small savings account Vernon had hidden under a false name. The evidence was all ready, with her lawyer. Divorce wasn't just an option now, it was a certainty. But Loretta wasn't looking for a quiet separation. She wanted complete exposure, and she had the tools. Using her quiet influence in the community board she served on, she had already alerted the neighborhood association that Vernon had lied about business expenses to receive tax write-offs for mentorship retreats. One of the venues listed, the same beachfront hotel where he had taken Zephyra. At work, Vernon's retirement celebration turned into a HR nightmare. Though he no longer held a position, the company had proudly posted about his service just the day before. The sudden, viral story forced them to remove all mention of him from their website. A spokesperson issued a cold, vague statement about reconsidering how we recognize past employees in light of new information. The legacy Vernon had worked so hard to build was being erased before his eyes. But Loretta had something else, brewing, something even Vernon didn't expect. Hidden in a safe deposit box was a series of letters Vernon had written years ago during a previous flirtation with another woman, a receptionist at the company. The letters were sentimental and romantic, written when Loretta had suffered complications after the birth of their son. She had found them years ago and stored them, waiting to see if she'd ever need them. She hadn't confronted him then, choosing instead to rebuild their marriage. Now, with everything exposed, she decided to use them to show a deeper pattern of betrayal. The story wasn't just about Zephyrah, it was about a man who had lied again and again, under the illusion that his wife would always stay silent. With help from Dorian and Shonda, Loretta prepared a feature piece to go live at the end of the week. The article was titled, "The Husband Behind the Curtain: What Retirement Didn't Reveal." It included anonymized excerpts from the letters, financial records proving misuse of funds, and carefully redacted sections of the footage that hinted at Vernon's manipulation of multiple women over the years. It was not slander. It was fact, documented, and undeniable. Vernon finally realized what he was truly up against when he received a cease and desist letter from Loretta's attorney. It accused him of financial misconduct, fraud, and infidelity, charges backed by undeniable proof. The letter made it clear Loretta wanted the house, half his pension, and full control over their remaining assets. She would not be swayed. He tried calling Zephyrah, but she never picked up. She had left town, moved out of her apartment, changed her number. Whether she had loved him or not didn't matter now. She wanted nothing more to do with the scandal. Vernon stood on the back patio that evening, staring out at the yard he had once mowed every Saturday morning. He was no longer respected, no longer admired. He wasn't even feared. He was a cautionary tale. And for the first time, he realized Loretta hadn't simply exposed him. She had buried the version of him that had once thrived on power and deceit, and he had no idea what she would do next. A week passed, but the waves of fallout from the retirement party continued to crash against Vernon Maddox's life with increasing force. What was once a slow unraveling had become a full collapse. The video's popularity had reached local news. Though Loretta's name was never officially mentioned, whispers turned to confirmations, and confirmations into a full-blown community scandal. Everyone knew. Former co-workers, neighbors, club members, they all had something to say, and most of it wasn't kind. Vernon tried to save face by making a statement on social media, denying certain aspects of the rumors, claiming the situation had been manipulated, but it backfired. People responded with screenshots, links to the video, even personal anecdotes exposing other moments of questionable behavior from his past. The more he spoke, the deeper he sank. His once polished image was permanently fractured. Meanwhile, Loretta operated like a woman on a mission. Her calm exterior masked a resolve forged over decades of silence, compromise, and sacrifice. Now, she was executing a plan years in the making. Her attorney moved quickly. Vernon was served with divorce papers during a lunch outing in front of a few remaining friends who still dared to be seen with him. The envelope was thick, heavy with documentation. There were no loopholes to exploit. Loretta had covered everything. Dorian and Shonda published the final feature article, timed perfectly with a popular local newsletter and Shonda's podcast episode titled "The Exit Strategy When Wives Strike Back." The article contained more than Vernon expected, new revelations, including a former intern who claimed Vernon had acted inappropriately during her time at his company. Though no criminal charges were filed, the weight of the allegations added to the crumbling narrative around him. Sponsors pulled out from a scholarship foundation he helped manage. A plaque bearing his name was quietly removed from a city mural. Inside her home, Loretta felt a strange mix of grief and empowerment. She walked through rooms filled with memories, some good, some suffocating. Framed photos of family vacations, graduation ceremonies, and holidays all held new meaning now. She didn't cry anymore. She wasn't angry either. What she felt was a clean detachment, a release from years of enduring a man who only showed love when it served him. She had mourned the marriage long before the retirement party. Now she was simply finishing what he had started. Her friends stood firmly behind her. Messages of support poured in. Women from church, old college roommates, even women she hadn't spoken to in years. One message stood out, a woman named Trina Delrose, who claimed to have been involved with Vernon years ago. Trina sent Loretta a long email apologizing, explaining that she, too, had been misled by Vernon's charm and stories of a distant, emotionally cold wife. Loretta didn't reply, but she saved the message. It confirmed something she'd always suspected. Zephyra hadn't been the first, and she likely wouldn't have been the last. As the days rolled on, Vernon's world grew smaller. He lost a position on the board of a local charity, and several longtime friends stopped returning his calls. Even his adult children were hesitant to speak with him. His daughter, Morella, sent a short message. "Mum doesn't deserve this. I'm staying with her for a while." His son, Brant, never responded at all. One afternoon, Vernon attempted to visit the house, trying to reclaim a few personal items, but he was met with locked doors and silence. Loretta had changed the locks, informed the police, and placed all future communication through her lawyer. He stood on the porch for a long time, unsure of what to do, before quietly walking away, unnoticed and unwanted. Loretta, on the other hand, was reclaiming her identity. She accepted a speaking invitation at a women's empowerment seminar in the next town over. She shared her story, not as gossip, but as a lesson in perseverance, strength, and clarity. The room was silent as she detailed the years she spent, doubting herself, questioning her worth, and ignoring the signs. When she finished, the applause was immediate and long-lasting. For the first time in decades, she felt heard. The house became hers alone, and she redecorated every room. She removed Vernon's office furniture, replaced old photos, and donated his clothes to charity. Every object tied to his past life was cleared. In the guest room, she began writing a memoir, part journal, part survival guide for women who felt trapped by appearances. She titled it, "The Party That Freed Me." Vernon eventually moved into a small rental apartment on the edge of town. No visitors came, no parties were thrown. He spent most of his days watching old television shows and scrolling through headlines that once would have featured his accomplishments, but now held none of his name. He grew quieter. A man who had once thrived on attention now shrank from it. He declined interviews. He avoided familiar places. He no longer had the strength to rebuild the illusion. In the end, Loretta didn't destroy Vernon. She revealed him. She simply turned the lights on in a room he had hoped would stay dark. And with the truth exposed, she walked forward. Not bitter, not broken, but unburdened. Her story, once tethered to his shadow, now stood alone in the sun.